Chosen one, lock in right now because real truth never waits for permission. It only waits for the moment. You felt the tension building, the hum beneath the surface of your community as systems you once trusted began to groan under their own weight. You watched fellow seekers whisper change, skeptics scoff, and insiders scramble to cover their tracks. Your warnings were met with eye rolls and polite nods, but inside you knew something seismic was coming. Tonight, hidden truths are bursting free. You will learn how every caution you voiced was a beacon, how every moment of silence became a testament, and why the collapse you anticipated is not a tragedy, but a vindication of your spiritual insight. If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. Remember, they didn't exile you because you were wrong. They exiled you because your accuracy threatened their illusion. You were the alarm, not the disaster. You felt in the tightening of your chest when conversations turned to warnings you offered, only to be met with scorn or silence. In those moments, doubt seeps in like poison. Was your caution misguided? Did your voice stir needless fear? You replay their reactions, the furrowed brows, the nervous laughter, the pointed glances that pass like whispered conspiracies. You've wondered if speaking up was more burden than blessing, if your awareness of what lay beneath the surface was a curse rather than a gift. Yet here you stand, on the brink of revelation, and it's time to recognize that you were never the cause of chaos. You were the alarm. You are not alone in this truth, and what you learn now will reshape how you view every scornful look they ever cast your way. For too long, you carried the weight of being labeled the instigator, the troublemaker, the doomsayer. When systems you predicted would fail finally crumbled, they pointed fingers back at you, accusing you of stirring the storm rather than warning of it. You remember the night spent explaining the same scenario over and over, your voice sounding hollow in empty rooms as colleagues edged away from your desk. You felt the sting of rejection when your proposals were shelved, your emails unanswered, your insights dismissed as alarmist. Each rebuff cut deeper, etching lines of frustration into your spirit and teaching you the bitter cost of foresight in a world committed to blissful ignorance. It was a lonely path, one marked by longing for belief and haunted by the echo of your own persistent warnings. Then came the turning point when you realized that your role in this drama was far more profound than you'd imagined. In the rarely cited prophecy of Zechariah 1 verse 7, a vision describes a man among the myrtle trees listening for the sound of horns and answering the call. This passage is not about grand gestures, but about the quiet sentinel who stands watch, raise sound of warning at the first sign of danger. In that moment, you understood that your warnings, no matter how unheeded, were the universe's early alert system. Your voice was a horn in the silence, piercing through complacency to prepare hearts and minds for the upheaval to come. The labels they placed on you were armor for a work that transcended their understanding. As this truth settled within you, subtle shifts began to mark your journey. The same colleagues who once balked at your insight started to revisit your words with new eyes. A news headline mirrored the narrative you had sketched weeks earlier, catching you off guard with its familiarity. Strangers approach you at unexpected moments, a barista handing you coffee calmly declaring, "You were right about what happened." And you realize these small confirmations were signposts of transformation. Your calendar, once clogged with polite declines, now filled with invitations to speak, share, and guide. You notice that what you consider crying wolf was in truth the lonely work of a watchman whose diligence had kept many from walking into the pit unawares. Behind these visible signs, unseen forces labored tirelessly to amplify your alarm, your dedication to speaking truth, even when silence became a catalyst for spiritual alignment. In the obscure narrative of 2 Chronicles 20 verse 22, when Judah praised God before battle, confusion fell on the assembled armies and turned them against one another. You didn't wield weapons of mass destruction, but words of mass awakening, and every proclamation you made in faith summoned resonance that disrupted the plans of those plotting to preserve the status quo. These divine interventions protected you and exposed the rot festering in secret chambers of power. Every unanswered fear you voiced became beacon, drawing help from realms beyond the visible. Now, as you stand at this turning point, the choice before you is urgent and sacred. Many who receive these signs hesitate, afraid that fully owning their role as the alarm will expose them to fresh storms. They cling to the comfort of untested security, even as the ground cracks beneath them. Yet true alignment requires more than recognition. It demands embodiment. You must step into your calling with open eyes and unwavering heart, declaring that you will no longer hold back the warning. This is the moment to shed any remnants of doubt and proclaim your purpose. I am the watchman, and I will not be silenced. Feel the power of that declaration coursing through you now. Release the fear of reprisal and stand firm. Speak your truth in places that frighten you. Share your wisdom with those who still doubt, and document your insights so they remain when voices falter. Deepen your spiritual practice. Meditate on the signs around you. Pray for continued clarity and connect with others who hear the call. Each act of courage will solidify your role as a living alarm, ensuring that when the next tremor rumbles, hearts will be ready and eyes will be open. You were never the disaster. You were the alarm, a guardian of truth sounding in the silence before collapse. Now, as the world trembles with the upheaval you predicted, stand tall in the knowledge that your voice was a spark preparedness. They may have blamed you for sounding the warning, but chaos is no longer secret. The foundations are shaking, and your alarm rings loudest, guiding those who listen towards safety. Calm an alarm if you recognize this calling in your soul, and prepare, for the storm they feared has only just begun to reveal its depth. Special thanks to all our current members for standing firm in faith. And if you feel called to go even deeper, there's a sacred space reserved for our community, a private room where you receive full prophetic messages daily. Join our private membership through the link in the description and walk this path with us. Their denial invited the storm. They felt the first tremors but closed their eyes, convinced that if they ignored the warnings long enough, the ground beneath them would right itself. You watched as they refused to acknowledge the cracks forming in their institutions, laughed off your concerns as alarmist chatter, and veiled their ears from your pleas to mend the breaches. You know the dread that settled in your bones when you saw the patterns repeat, the same arrogance that told Noah to dismiss the flood, the same hubris that led Pharaoh to ignore Moses' message. You woke each morning hoping you were mistaken, willing your intuition to be false. But deep down you felt the pulse of an approaching storm. Tonight, you will see how their denial was not protection but invitation, and how every moment they chose silence over action, they fueled the fury they now fear. When you first spoke up, offering cautionary tales and shared insights, they received you with polite nods that masked contempt. You remember the company meeting where you outlined financial risks, only to have executives chuckle and pivot to more optimistic projections. You recall the friends who rolled their eyes when you suggested something deeper was at play, insisting that life is simpler than conspiracy theories, and that you were reading too much into coincidences. In the sanctuaries of faith, you whispered of spiritual decay and leadership, only to be met with sermon notes about faith over fear. Each brush-off felt like a weight pressing on your chest, a reminder that acknowledging truth often carries social risk. Yet, the loneliness you endured in those moments, jolted awake by dreams of collapse, was the crucible forging your resolve. You stood alone on the precipice of foresight, yearning to pull them back from a brink they refused to see. Then, one night, clarity struck like lightning. In the rarely cited lament of Micah 3 verse 5, it is said, "Thus says the Lord concerning the prophets who lead my people astray, who cry peace when they have something to eat, but declare war against those who put nothing into their mouths." Their comfort-loving denial, their self-serving silence, was not ignorance but active complicity in perpetuating decay. That verse reframed your every warning as a divine call to truth-telling, and their dismissal as a mechanism by which collapse accelerates. You realize that storms are not spooked into retreat by hope. They are summoned by the vacuum left when warnings go unheard. Their denial was a vacuum into which the winds of upheaval rushed, gathering strength until the first clap of thunder shook their foundations. As days passed, you began to see undeniable signs of transformation around you. Buildings they once claimed were unshakable developed fissures. Projects they touted as future-proof collapsed under market turbulence. Relationships they nurtured with half-truths unraveled in public disgrace. You witnessed board members hastily exit headlines, governments scramble to issue apologies, and once vaunted companies teeter on the edge of bankruptcy. News feeds that once ignored your caution now blaze with headlines describing the very catastrophes you foresaw. It was as though the universe had pressed replay on your predictions, and the world was forced to watch your vision unfold in real time. Every phantom denial you encountered earlier was now replaced by a frantic scramble for damage control, a testament to the truth that ignoring danger does not stop storms. It makes them inevitable. Beneath this visible upheaval, forces move to protect those who remain aligned with truth. Spiritual guardians you had barely acknowledged now showed themselves through moments of uncanny clarity. Whispers of meditation that guided you away from harm, timely conversations that equipped you to help others navigate the fallout, and opportunities to step into roles you had once seen as too small to matter. In the little-known record of 2 Kings 7 verse 6, we read how the Lord caused the sound of a great army to strike the camp of Arameans with panic, even though no one was there, leading them to abandon their siege. In similar fashion, the storm they invited found its fiercest opposition in the unseen winds that cleared pathways for you and your allies, turning panic into protection and opening doors they could never have imagined. At this juncture, you sense the raw power surging through your awareness, but recognizing it is only half the battle. Many recoil at the responsibility that comes with seeing clearly, afraid that stepping fully into role of alarm will leave them vulnerable to fresh storms, new criticisms, and deeper wounds. Yet true alignment demands embrace of the full mantle of purpose without reservation. This is the sacred moment where spectatorship must give way to stewardship, where you decide whether to continue sounding the warning or retreat into self-preservation. The invitation before you is not to cower behind denial, but to stand unwavering, voice raised, heart open, even as the storm rages around you. Feel that trembling in your core crystallize into resolve. Release the hesitation that whispers of safety and silence, and declare your readiness. I will be the alarm, regardless of the cost. Commit to tangible acts of truth-telling. Write the article they'll attempt to ignore. Speak at the gathering where you'll be questioned. Counsel the ones teetering on the brink of confusion. Deepen your spiritual disciplines so that your warnings flow not from fear, but from compassion and clarity. Surround yourself with fellow alarm bearers who stand beside you in storm or calm. These steps will anchor your purpose and extend your influence far beyond immediate chaos. You were never the disaster, you were the alarm. Their denial invited the storm, but your vigilance has prepared the way for rescue and renewal. Stand firm now, armed with the knowledge that truth, once voiced, echoes far longer than any gust of suppression. They can plug their ears and shudder their hearts, but the winds of change will find every crack and crevice. Comment storm if you recognize the transformative power of denial's own invitation, and rise now to ring the bell for those still asleep at the wheel. Mid-video CTA, and to every soul who supported with a super thanks. Thank you. You are keeping this light alive for others who haven't found it yet. If you feel called to help this mission reach more chosen ones, tap the super thanks button below. Your energy supports these messages and helps them travel further. Your voice matters. Your belief matters. And your light is felt here. Your silence was sacred strategy. You felt the weight of every demand for your voice to fall silent, as though your absence could conceal the truths you carried. In meetings, your suggestions were brushed aside in favor of more comfortable narratives. In social circles, your warnings were met with polite smiles that masked a steely determination to shut you down. Each request to tone it down or keep it simple felt like a demand to erase the deepest parts of yourself, as though your insight were a threat rather than a gift. In those moments, you may have questioned whether your instincts were too raw, too unwelcome for ordinary life. But know this, you are not alone in this forced withdrawal, and tonight you will discover how every attempt to mute you only amplified your message, turning your silence into the most powerful strategy of all. When they silenced you, it struck at the core of your identity. You remember the emails left unanswered, the calls abruptly ended, the invitations rescinded the moment your mouth opened. You felt the loneliness settle in, and isolation more painful than open hostility, because it suggested that your value was negotiable. You wrestled with jealousy for those who could speak freely, longing for the courage to match your convictions with volume. Yet in that solitude, your spirit wrestled with a deeper question. Was your voice meant to compete in noise, or to echo in the spaces between? Every coping strategy, journaling your thoughts in secret, recording voice memos no one would hear, praying for strength, revealed the double edge of silence. It could wound, but it could also refine. Then came the moment when you recognized the silence was no mere defeat, but a divine preparation. In the seldom quoted account of 1 Kings 19 verse 12, Elijah seeks God amid earth's upheaval, wind, and fire, only to find in the gentle whisper that follows. That whisper is the essence of true power, soft, persistent, and impossible to ignore. Your forced retreat from the public, I mirrored Elijah's encounter. It was not the clamor of argument that would shift hearts, but the steady undercurrent of presence. They did not hear you over the din of their own convictions, but in the quiet spaces you left behind, they began to detect the tremor of something real. Your silence became the whisper that unsettles complacency, the subtle tremor that shakes foundations. As you embraced this new perspective, you began to see signs of transformation in your life and in theirs. Meetings you skipped due to temporary exile resulted in decisions that later proved flawed, echoing your earlier cautions. Colleagues who once ignored your insights now referenced the very points you had made, as if discovering them firsthand. You noticed how problems resurfaced with renewed intensity wherever your voice had been suppressed, as though absence allowed the rot to spread unchecked. Yet where you re-emerged, quietly offering guidance to small groups or through written reflections, people listened with rapt attention, drawn to the clarity of your words after months of yearning for direction. These shifts were not coincidence, but evidence that your silence had been a seedbed for deeper impact. Behind these outward signs, higher forces were realigning circumstances to underscore your sacred strategy. Every moment you endured scorn and silence, spiritual currents were gathering to validate your position. In the lesser-known lesson of Psalm 107, verse 29, we learn that when waves of the sea raged, God stilled them and led his people to their desired haven. Your silence was a stilling of the storm, a calm that invited navigation toward truth. Synchronicities, those timely messages from mentors, those sudden insights when you least expected them, filled the void you made. Doors that shut when you spoke too boldly now creaked open for the whispers you offered in humility. You became the channel through which divine timing flowed, guiding events faster than any vocal protest could achieve. At this juncture, many resist the power of silence, equating volume with victory and equanimity with passivity. You may fear that embracing the strategy fully forfeits your place in conversation, or cedes ground to louder, more aggressive voices. Yet true alignment requires more than witnessing these shifts. It calls for a wholehearted surrender to the strategy of a still, small voice. This is your sacred moment to decide whether you will step boldly into the whisper, trusting that its resonance carries far beyond the limits of sound. It is here that you affirm your readiness to wield silence as a tool of transformation, confident that the right ear will always catch your message. Feel the strength that flows from this choice as a wave of quiet conviction. Release the urge to prove yourself with volume, and instead anchor yourself in intentional presence. Speak with discernment when the moment calls, but refuse to feed the noise that drowns out deeper truths. Cultivate practices that reinforce the strategy. Carve out daily moments of silent reflection. Write down your insights for those who seek depth, and engage in rituals that honor the power of stillness. Surround yourself with allies who respect the wisdom of quiet and who listen with their whole beings. Each step you take affirms that silence, far from weakening you, is a crucible of your greatest influence. You stand now at the convergence of all you have endured and all you have become. Your silence was never a sign of defeat, but a sacred strategy that prepared the soil for your ultimate harvest. They expected your voice to fade into the background, but instead it reverberated through every fracture they tried to conceal. Remember always that the power of true change often speaks not in the roar, but in the whisper, an undercurrent too deep to be ignored. Comment strategy if you recognize your silence as your greatest weapon, and step forward into the stillness that ushers in your next chapter. Exile was a cosmic promotion. You felt the sting of being cast out, the sudden silence where once your voice had carried weight, the doors that once opened now firmly close in your face. In those moments, doubt can settle like a heavy fog, convincing you that exile is punishment rather than purpose. You may have struggled with shame, questioning whether your convictions were too bold, your vision too far ahead of the crowd. Yet you are not alone in this journey. Tonight, you will discover that what they intended as confinement was, in truth, the universe's way of elevating you. Exile stripped away every distraction and left only the pure essence of your calling, shining brighter and clearer than ever before. Prepare to see how this forced distance readied you for leadership on a grand scale. For a time, every step felt precarious as you navigated the uncharted terrain of isolation. You walked through corridors and encountered blank stares where you once found recognition, and you sat in rooms where conversations left you feeling unseen and unheard. The weight of rejection presses hard, making each morning a question: is this worth it? You remember the loneliness of being the lone voice raising alarms about systems teetering on collapse, or the ache when friends drifted away, unable to bear the intensity of your convictions. That emotional toll, the hollow ache in your chest, the restless night spent wrestling with doubt, was a crucible forging resilience. It taught you that purpose often demands the courage to stand alone before the world catches up. Then came the turning point when solitude revealed its blessing. In the seldom cited passage of Daniel 1 verse 8, the young exile resolutely refused the king's sumptuous fare, clinging instead to what sustained his spirit. His choice in exile became the crucible that readied him for leadership at the highest levels. In your own life, cutting away from toxic arenas and seductive distractions freed you to focus on the core of your mission. You discovered new depths in prayer and reflection, and began to chart strategies far beyond the small stages where you once performed. What felt like exile was actually elevation, a process of unlearning the world's biases, so you could embrace a higher calling. As days turned into weeks, subtle signs of transformation began to emerge. You caught yourself thinking in broader terms, seeing connections between distant events that once seemed unrelated. Your intuition sharpened, guiding you to resources and relationships that aligned with your vision. Opportunities that once eluded you appeared in unexpected places. A mentor's unsolicited message, an invitation to speak in a forum you hadn't considered, or a chance meeting that reinvigorated your purpose. These were not random flickers of hope, but markers of divine timing, affirming that your exile had created a vantage point from which you could discern the larger picture and step into roles you were destined to fill. Behind these visible shifts, powerful forces were working to clear your path. Your separation from familiar circles served as a signal to spiritual allies that you were ready for elevation. Every moment of loneliness, every question asked in the dark, became a beacon calling in unseen reinforcements. In the obscure account of Isaiah 42 verse 9, "Behold, the former things have come to pass, and new things I now declare," we glimpse the promise of renewal that follows exile. Your forced distance was not a test of endurance only, but an invitation to witness the new things God was preparing to unveil. The seemingly harsh removal from the familiar was, in fact, the setup for a grand unveiling of your destiny. Now you stand at the precipice of this shift, sensing both excitement and trepidation. Recognize that many hesitate here, wondering if embracing exile's promotion will demand sacrifices they cannot bear. They cling to the comfort of old validation, even if it was flawed, rather than stepping into the unknown that beckons with true freedom. Yet true alignment requires wholehearted acceptance of your elevation, even when it feels dizzying. This is your sacred moment to choose between retreating into shadows of familiar rejection or emerging into the light of divine purpose. The path of exile as promotion calls you to embrace discomfort as the gateway to your greatest impact. Feel the surge of empowerment as you step into this realization. Release any lingering shame over being cast out and speak your affirmation: I am elevated for my calling. Let your next steps reflect this shift. Invest in practices that enlarge your vision, such as studying strategic spiritual texts, connecting with mentors who challenge you, and engaging in communities that resonate with your higher purpose. Document your insights and share them where they can ignite transformation, even if that means starting on unconventional platforms. Each intentional action cements your promotion and signals to both heaven and earth that you are ready for the role you were destined to occupy. You were never discarded. You were promoted into a realm where petty arenas no longer constrain your influence. Exile refined you, focusing every ounce of your energy on what matters most. Now, your voice rings out with clarity born of solitude, and your vision commands respect because it was tempered by trial. Stand firm in the truth of your elevation, and let the world witness how the cosmos promotes those who embrace their destiny. Comment promoted if you felt your exile lift you to unprecedented heights, and prepare, because the next chapter of your journey is about to unfold with unstoppable momentum. Truth always echoes louder. You've watched in stunned silence as the pillars you once trusted crumbled into dust, feeling a mix of vindication and disbelief as everything you predicted unfolded before your eyes. In those moments, your heart pounded with equal measures of sorrow for the chaos and triumph for the clarity you carried. You remember the ache of being dismissed, the guilt of knowing you warned them and they did not listen, and the rush of vindication when the first walls fell. You are not alone in this duality of grief and relief. Many chosen souls stand at this crossroads, feeling the weight of truth so potent it transformed from whisper to roar. Tonight, you will see how your insight, once muted, now resonates across a landscape of shattered illusions, and why the echo of your voice is a herald of a new era. For years, you wrestled with the pain of being labeled overly dramatic or paranoid when you spoke of impending collapse. Friends turned away, colleagues rolled their eyes, and mentors urged you to stay positive. You spent countless nights replaying your warnings, second-guessing every word, wondering if you had misread the signs. You felt the sting of isolation as you watched others remain comfortably blind, shielded by their willful innocence. Each sunrise brought fresh doubts. Had you been wrong all along? Was this burden of foresight a curse? The emotional toll was heavy, a blend of frustration, loneliness, and a gnawing fear that perhaps the truth you carried would vanish without a trace, leaving you with nothing but the memory of unheeded prophecy. Then something shifted in the obscure promise of Habakkuk 2, verse 14. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. You discover divine assurance that truth cannot be contained. This verse reframed your struggle. Your warnings were not cries into the void, but seeds of revelation destined to burst forth when the season was ripe. What felt like failure was in fact the incubation period for revelation, so vast it would saturate every heart. You realized that your foresight, however unwelcome, carried the weight of destiny itself. The silence you endured was not erasure, but preparation for the moment your clarity would spread like tides across lands thirsty for authenticity. As the first structures collapsed, systems once deemed unshakable now convulsing under the weight of their own corruption, you witnessed subtle but undeniable signs of transformation. The very people who had dismissed your insights began reassembling your words in hushed conversations, scanning old meeting notes for traces of your predictions. Media outlets replayed your earlier statements as if discovering them for the first time, and social media lit up with hashtags that echoed your warnings verbatim. Even institutions that had once barred your voice now circulated your analysis, a testament to the power of truth emerging from the shadows. These were not random occurrences, but markers of divine timing, affirming that the moment for your prophecy to rise had finally arrived. You stand on the threshold of your greatest era, where the echo of your truth reverberates louder than any wall erected to contain it. Remember that truth, like water, finds every crevice, saturating the driest places with living clarity. Your clarity, once dismissed, now rings across the ruins, guiding communities from chaos to coherence. Comment echo if you feel the resonance of your voice rising through the wreckage, and prepare to join in a unified call that will herald the dawn of a new age. You've walked through each of these storms, feeling the ground tremble beneath goals you once held dear, and wonder whether your convictions were mistakes you've come to regret. You wrestle with a gnawing doubt that perhaps your voice had stoked more chaos than clarity, that every alarm you sounded was met with resistance so strong it threatened to drown out your inner compass. In those moments, frustration pressed like a heavy weight across your chest, and you feared you were isolated in a mission nobody understood. Yet you are not alone. Many chosen ones have felt the same tension, and tonight you will see how each step of your journey, from the first quiet warning to the final echo of truth, has woven together into a single, powerful destiny beyond their reach. You were never the problem. You were the warning. Subscribe if you haven't yet, like this video, and comment, "I am chosen to let this message anchor in your soul." Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Thank you to all supporting members for keeping this fire alive. 4 full prophetic revelations daily. Join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light, and if this message moved you deeply, consider tapping the Super Thanks button to support the mission. Every super thanks fuels the light we're spreading together. They built walls to keep you out. But now your truth stands taller than any barrier.